There are 10 structures across Europe that Nazi Germany built to last 1,000 years, and everyone is still standing, because nobody worked out how to take them down. Some are submarine bunkers with roofs 7 meters thick. Others are gun towers a whole city has learned to live around. Then, in 1945, the war ended with most of them unfinished, and dealing with them fell to everybody else. We found 10. Number 1 is a U-boat factory near Bremen called Valentin, torn open by 10-ton bombs 3 weeks before its first submarine was due. How do you get rid of a building that will not come down? Europe has been quietly failing to answer that question for 80 years, and it starts with the smallest thing on this list. Number 10. The Besseringen Bunker, Germany. On a wooded slope above the river Saar, near the town of Merzig, 2 rusted steel domes poke out of the grass. Everything else is underground. It was built in 1938 and 1939, part of the belt of fortifications the Germans called the West Wall and the Allies called the Siegfried Line. The line ran for some 630 kilometers along the western border, and around 14,800 bunkers were built along it. The biggest and strongest were a class the Germans simply graded B, and only 32 of those were ever finished. This one goes 3 stories down. It has 44 rooms, walls, and a roof, 1.5 meters thick, and it was designed so that 90 men could live and fight inside it, sealed off from the world, for up to a month. The West Wall never held. But when the war was over and the Allies set about blowing up the line bunker by bunker, this one was somehow missed. Almost every other B bunker was stripped, dynamited, and levelled. The one at Besseringen is the only one left fully intact, with all its armoured cupolas still in place. It is a museum now, run by volunteers restoring it room by room. You go down into it and find the kitchen, the sick bay, the engine room, the bunks, all of it laid out as it was. The strongest thing about it is not the concrete. It is that it survived being forgotten. The next one was never meant to be seen at all. Number 9, the Schwerbelastungskoerper, Berlin. In a quiet corner of the Tempelhof district, wedged between a housing estate and a railway line, there is a squat, grey cylinder of concrete that looks like the base of a lighthouse that never got its lighthouse. It was poured in 1941 by French prisoners of war, and its name means roughly heavy, load-bearing body. Hitler and his architect, Albert Speer, meant to rebuild Berlin as a world capital they would call Germania, and its centrepiece was to be a triumphal arch 3 times the size of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Berlin sits on marsh and sand. Nobody knew whether the ground could carry that kind of weight, so they built this to find out. 12,650 tons of solid concrete, 21 meters across, sunk 18 meters into the earth, with gauges fitted to measure how far it settled. If it sank less than 6 centimeters, the ground was sound. It sank 19. So the arch, as drawn, could never have stood there without stabilizing half the district first. The war took care of the rest. The cylinder was supposed to end up buried under a grand road that was never laid. After the war, there were plans to demolish it, but by then, houses had grown up around it, and bringing it down would have taken them with it. So it stays. There is a viewing platform and 3 information boards, and not much else. It is the only piece of Germania that was ever actually built. A test that failed, left standing because it was too heavy to move. The next one was not a test, it was a base for the men who nearly won the Atlantic. Number 8. The Dora Bunker, Trondheim, Norway. On the working waterfront at Trondheim, among the cranes and the container yards, there is a block of concrete so large it now holds an entire cluster of businesses inside it. The Germans called it Dora, the letter D in their spelling alphabet, and they began building it in the autumn of 1941. Norway gave the German Navy a back door to the Atlantic and the Arctic, and Trondheim became the largest German naval base in Northern Europe, home to a whole flotilla of U-boats. Those submarines needed a roof that bombs could not get through. The roof they poured was 3.5 meters of reinforced concrete. The bunker runs over 150 meters long, with 5 pens and room for 16 boats, and it was raised on soft mud, so it sank as they worked by as much as 15 centimeters. The labor was forced. 5 Serbian workers were killed when a wall came down on them. The Allies tried to bomb Dora once in November 1944, but low cloud and a German smokescreen turned the bombers back, so it came through the war almost undamaged, which left the obvious problem of what to do with it. Norwegian engineers looked at dynamiting the thing and gave up. It was too big, and the blast would have taken the harbour with it. Instead, they added 2 extra floors on top, painted them blue, and put it to work. Today, the pens hold the city and regional archives, well over 100,000 shelf meters of documents kept safe by the bunker's strange, stable climate. There is also a bowling alley. A machine built to send men out to sink ships now keeps a region's paperwork dry. That is one way to be left with a Nazi megastructure. Give it a new job. The next one has never been given a new job because nobody has ever worked out what job a place like that could now do. Number 7. The Nazi Rally Grounds, Nuremberg, Germany. On the edge of Nuremberg, around a lake called the Dutzenteich, there is a grandstand 360 meters long and a horseshoe of brick the size of a Roman amphitheatre, and both of them are slowly coming apart. This was the stage for the Nazi party rallies, designed by Albert Speer and built through the 1930s. Between 1933 and 1938, the party staged 6 of them here, choreographed for the newsreel cameras, hundreds of thousands of uniformed men moving in blocks across the field, while Hitler spoke from the tribune. The grandstand alone could hold 70,000 people. Nearby, the foundations were laid for a stadium meant to seat over 400,000, which would have been the largest on Earth. It never rose above the ground. When the Americans took the grounds in 1945, they blew the swastika off the tribune for the cameras. But the tribune itself would not go away. In 1967, the city dynamited its long colonnade and only succeeded in cracking the rest of the structure. Since then, it has been left to rot, fenced off in the places where the stone is coming down. The city has now decided neither to restore it nor to demolish it, but to spend tens of millions of euros simply holding it in the state of decay it has already reached. The reasoning is careful: rebuild it and you glorify it. Knock it down and you look as though you are hiding something. So it stands, crumbling on purpose. A monument built to outlast 1,000 years, kept alive now only as a warning. The rally grounds were meant to overawe a crowd. The next structure was built to save one. Number 6. The Humboldthain Flak Tower, Berlin. In a park in the north of Berlin, half sunk into a green hill, there is a slab of grey concrete the size of an office block, with gun platforms still jutting from the top of it. It is one of a pair of flak towers thrown up at Humboldthain in the winter of 1941, in barely 6 months. After the first British raids on Berlin, Hitler ordered a ring of these towers built to defend the capital. The large ones carried heavy anti-aircraft guns on the roof. Inside, spread over several floors, they sheltered civilians, as many as 15,000 at a time, behind walls 2.5 meters thick. If you are enjoying these, take a second to subscribe, because there is a version of this list for almost every country on the map. And I mention it now because from here the structures only get bigger, and the last 3 are the ones this whole video was built around. After the war, the French garrison set about demolishing Berlin's towers. The Zoo Tower was blown up over several attempts. But the pair at Humboldthain stood right beside a railway line running into the Soviet sector, and bringing them down risked bringing down the tracks and a diplomatic incident with them. So they were only half destroyed and then buried. Rubble cleared from the ruined city was piled against the surviving tower until it became a hill. You can walk up that hill today. The interior has been reopened by a group of volunteers, and from the old gun platforms you get one of the finest views in Berlin, standing on a machine built to shoot down the men who flattened the streets below. The park grew over it. The tower is still in there. So far, these have been shelters, monuments, and test rigs. From here, they get harder to explain, and the first of them was built not to defend anyone, but to breed a ruling class. Number 5. The Krossinsee Order Castle, Poland. Deep in the forests of what is now northwestern Poland, beside a lake, there is a complex of grey stone halls and towers behind a military fence. Get too close and soldiers will turn you away. The Germans called it an Ordensburg, an order castle. Ground was broken in 1934 and it opened in 1936. It was the first of 3 such castles, elite schools, where the party meant to forge its next generation of leaders. The cadets had to be aged between 23 and 26, physically flawless, and what the regime called racially pure. Mornings were philosophy and party doctrine. Afternoons were drills, boxing and riding. It cost 20 million Reichsmarks, and it was built in heavy rustic stone on granite footings, dressed up to look like the fortress of a knightly order that had never existed. The men, it turned out, were supposed to run a 1,000-year empire. But the empire lasted 11 years, and a great many of them were dead inside a few of those, killed at the front. When the border moved west in 1945, the whole complex ended up inside Poland. It did not fall into ruin. It became a Polish army base, and it still is one, home to a tank battalion. 2 of the original Nazi towers still stand among the modern buildings. In 2016, archaeologists dug a sealed copper cylinder out of the foundations of one of them. Inside, perfectly preserved, were newspapers from 1934, photographs of Hitler, and 2 copies of Mein Kampf. The school, built to last forever, now trains the soldiers of the country it was built to conquer. There is one structure still ahead of us that the bombers actually reached. The Germans could see the reconnaissance planes overhead as they poured its roof. They kept pouring anyway. But before we get there, one more city that gave up trying to remove its concrete. Number 4. The Augarten Flak Towers, Vienna, Austria. In the oldest park in Vienna, rising straight out of the flat green as if they had landed there, stand 2 enormous concrete towers. Pensioners play boules at the foot of the larger one. Nobody is allowed inside either. These are the last flak towers the Third Reich ever built, begun late in 1942. Vienna got 3 pairs of them, more than any city except Berlin, and it is the only city that still has the complete set. The pair in the Augarten are the tallest of the lot, 13 floors, some 55 metres high, with a roof 3.5 metres thick. The gun tower could shelter 20,000 people. In 1946, children got inside and set off a store of anti-aircraft shells. The explosion lifted part of the roof and tore several floors off one side. But even wounded, the tower would not come down, and the Viennese never found a way to remove it. Demolition was ruled out as impossible. When the city of Hamburg tried to chisel down a smaller tower of the same type in the 1970s, the job dragged on so long it became a local legend. So Vienna has learned to live around them. Elsewhere in the city, one tower is an aquarium, one is an army data store, one holds an art collection. But the Augarten pair are left empty, wrapped in steel cables to stop them shedding concrete, deteriorating in full public view. One side of the larger tower carries 2 words, painted in German, "Never again." A city that cannot bury its past because the past is quite literally too heavy to lift. But this was never really about single buildings. On the coast of France, the Germans poured something on a different order altogether, and a whole town paid for it. Number 3, the Keroman submarine base, Lorient, France. On a peninsula in the Breton port of Lorient stand 3 vast blocks of concrete, the largest 168 metres long, their roofs up to 7 metres thick. The Germans built them from 1941 and named them Keroman 1, 2 and 3. After France fell, the U-boat commander Karl Donitz moved his submarines to the French Atlantic coast, closer to the shipping lanes they were sent to cut. Lorient became the largest U-boat base in France. 15,000 workers built it. More than 200 submarines passed through. The first block was so clever it barely needed the sea. Submarines were hauled out of the water up a slipway, set on a wheeled cradle, and rolled on rails into dry pens under the concrete. The bunkers were built to shrug off any bomb in existence, and they did. But the Allies bombed anyway, again and again. And since the concrete would not break, the bombs came down on everything around it instead. The town of Lorient was almost completely destroyed. The base came through very nearly untouched. This is the pattern the whole list keeps returning to. The Reich built these things to outlast 1,000 years, and in a grim way they managed it, because they outlasted the cities they were meant to protect, and they have outlasted every attempt since to be rid of them. The base is still there, too solid to remove, so it was kept. 1 block is open to visitors. You can walk its 7-metre roof and tour a Cold War submarine moored below. The rest is an industrial estate and a home port for ocean racing yachts. The town rebuilt itself from nothing. The bunker never had to. But the most heavily bombed of them all still stands almost exactly as the Germans left it. Number 2, the Saint-Nazaire submarine base, France. A short way up the same coast, in the port of Saint-Nazaire, sits a single block of concrete 300 metres long, with 14 submarine pens and a roof 8 metres deep. It went up between 1941 and 1942, built by the organisation TOD, the regime's construction agency, using around 4,600 workers and nearly 500,000 cubic metres of concrete. Like Lorient, it sheltered the U-boats hunting the Atlantic convoys. Inside were workshops, dormitories, a bakery, a hospital, everything a submarine and its crew needed between patrols. The Allies understood exactly how dangerous it was. Between late 1942 and late 1943, they flew more than 2,000 sorties against the French bunkers, and Saint-Nazaire alone weathered around 50 raids. The roof held every time. The bombs that might have cracked it, the 10-ton Grand Slams, did not yet exist in numbers, and by the time they did, the war had moved on. After it was over, the Allies studied the problem of demolition. They costed it. Then they walked away. It was simply too expensive to destroy. So the town took it back. Since the 1990s, the base has been folded into the everyday life of Saint-Nazaire. There are cafes and a bar inside it, an exhibition on the roof, a museum shaped like an ocean liner, and a real submarine you can walk through. The most heavily bombed building on the French coast is now somewhere you go for a coffee. There was one more, larger than all of them, and it was racing the end of the war. It lost by 3 weeks. Number 1. The Valentin submarine pens, Bremen, Germany. On the bank of the river Weser, downstream from Bremen, there is a structure so long that when you stand at one end, you cannot pick out the detail of the other. It runs 426 metres, nearly 100 wide, and up to 27 metres high. People who see it for the first time reach for the word cathedral, and it is bigger than most cathedrals. The Germans called it Valentin, and they began building it in 1943. By then, the U-boats were losing the Atlantic. The plan was to save the campaign with a new kind of submarine, the Type 21, built on a production line under a roof no bomb could pierce. Valentin was that roof. Sections of submarine would arrive by water, be assembled bay by bay along the length of the hull, and slide out into the river, finished. At full speed, the factory was meant to turn out a new boat every 56 hours. It was the largest fortified U-boat facility in Germany, second in all of Europe, only to the base at Brest. Between 10 and 12,000 people built it. Most of them slave labourers and prisoners of war, worked in shifts around the clock. Around 1,600 of them died doing it, from exhaustion, starvation, disease and outright murder. That number belongs beside the scale, not behind it. By March 1945, Valentin was 90% finished. The roof was 4.5 meters of reinforced concrete, and in places the Germans were already thickening it towards 7 because they could see, quite literally, that they were being watched. Reconnaissance had photographed every stage. Then, on the 27th of March, the Royal Air Force came with the heaviest bombs ever dropped. 20 Lancasters, each carrying a single tallboy or 10-ton Grand Slam. 2 of the Grand Slams struck the roof. They bored halfway through the concrete before they detonated and brought 1,000 tons of it crashing down into the hall. 3 weeks. That is how close Valentin came to launching its first submarine. It never launched a single one. The Germans abandoned it. The Allies bombed the ruin after the war and concluded that no bomb they had could reliably destroy a structure like this. Blowing it up would have flattened the villages next door. So they left it, exactly as it stood. For decades, the German Navy used one corner for storage. The rest stayed empty, the holes still open in the roof. Today, it is a memorial to the people who died building a weapon that was never fired. You can walk inside, under the punctured concrete, into a space designed to build machines of war that instead became the largest thing on this list nobody has ever found a use for or a way to be rid of. There is a particular kind of ruin, the Second World War, left across Europe, and it is not the bombed cathedral or the shelled town, because those got rebuilt. It is the thing that was built too well. The bunker, the tower, the test block, the stone stadium, poured and reinforced to outlast everyone who might ever want them gone, and then abandoned before they were even finished. You cannot restore them because to restore them is to celebrate them. You often cannot remove them because they were built by people who were terrified of exactly that. So Europe does the only thing left. It keeps them. It fences them, wraps them in cable, buries them under parks, turns them into archives and aquariums and museums, and walks past them on the way to work. 10 of them today, and there are many more. There are always more. The men who built these places wanted to be remembered for 1,000 years. They will be, just not for anything they intended. Subscribe, and we will walk the next 10 together. Thank you.